everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm gonna have a little sit down, cozy Q&A all about trying to conceive, all about trying to get pregnant because I'm 18 months into trying for baby number 2, still nothing. And this is something that I very consciously talk publicly about. I know many of you are also struggling with trying to conceive, or TTC as it shall hence be known. And I know that these videos and me talking about it has helped lots of people just feel less alone because it can be a very isolating experience. And then also just as a selfish reason for me, I've spent the last 14, 15 years of my life processing the things that I experience in video blog form, and I won't be changing that today. And if this helps someone or you learn something, then even better. We love that. So for context, hi, hello. If you are new here, I'm Hannah. I documented the entire experience of trying to conceive and pregnancy and birth for my first child in the Hormone Diaries series, which is all on my sex education channel. And so if you're interested in the round 1, if you didn't catch that the first time, that's all there for you. I've not been rigorously documenting this experience of trying to conceive, and there is actually a question about that, which we will get to in terms of why. But the context is it took us a year to conceive our first, and now we are a year and a half into trying to conceive for our second. I have PCOS or PCO, still unsure whether I've got the syndrome or just the polycystic ovaries, which we discovered that I had whilst trying to conceive for our first. So I asked my followers on Instagram what questions they had about TTC round 2, and you guys had a lot of questions and we've categorized them. We've got themes. But before we get into that, I wanted to thank this video sponsor, Squarespace. So whether you are starting out in the freelance world or you're a small business owner, Squarespace makes it super easy for anyone to build their own beautiful website, engage their audience, and sell anything from physical and digital products to courses and even your time, all in one place and all on your terms. I have been using Squarespace for years for my main website and the websites of other various projects that I've done over the years. I feel like I say this every time, but we're currently updating the website, currently working on some changes to reflect some of the new consulting and mentoring work that I do for creators. And it is actually happening this time because I have written all of the copy for it. But Squarespace makes it so easy as things adapt and change in your business to make updates and change things and to tweak things and add things and take things away. It is super intuitive and really, really simple. Squarespace have tons of beautiful website templates, and you just pick the one that works best for you and your brand and your project and your business, and you can customize it with all of your own content and assets and media. And Squarespace's new design intelligence empowers anyone to design their own beautiful, personalized, tailored to you website using AI technology. And Squarespace Blueprint really holds your hand through the whole process. So if you are an absolute beginner, no website design experience at all, that does not matter. You just answer some questions and it takes you step by step through the whole process of designing your own brilliant website. And if you want to get snazzy, then Squarespace has a huge suite of visual design tools to help you create a really engaging website. There are loads of effects options built in and ready to go on any Squarespace website and to fit whatever your brand, business, or purpose is. So if you are in need of a website, then head to squarespace.com to start your free trial. And then when you are ready to launch it into the world, you can go to squarespace.com/morehannah to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Right, time to answer some of your questions. Our first category is NHS and private healthcare. How is the process through the NHS for number 2? Is there much fertility help available? So the short answer is no, none. We already have a child, and I checked the eligibility criteria for any fertility support in our trust, our fertility NHS region or whatever. If you already have a child, then you're not eligible. But the long answer is I have been able to get some support from my GP because of my polycystic ovaries, and that's something that we already know. And those initial scans and tests that I had The first time round were all done on the NHS. My GP was able to get some more blood tests done for me just to confirm that it was still the case. And then they were able to prescribe me metformin, which is typically a diabetes medication, but a lot of folks who have PCOS use it to help regulate their menstrual cycles. So I've been taking metformin and that has been an NHS prescription, but any other kind of fertility tests and treatment beyond that, because we already have a child, would have to be private. Speaking of which, would you ever make a video about the finances of private fertility treatment? Perhaps I would if we got to the stage where, we were doing IVF and, spending that money and having to figure out the finances of all of that. But I can tell you, because I've had 2 different private healthcare fertility treatments. One was the tests, so they had to do like blood tests, they had to have an ultrasound again, and Dan had to have a semen analysis. And then I also more recently had a HICOSI, which I could not tell you what that stands for, but it's the one where they check your uterus and your fallopian tube. So they have to pump fluids around it all and check it on the ultrasound to see if they can see if your fallopian tubes are open or if they're blocked. So I can tell you that the initial fertility assessment, so that included the consultation and the ultrasound and the semen analysis, that was £565, and then the HICOSI was another £565. So far we have spent £1,130 on fertility treatment. I don't pay for my NHS prescriptions because I have a stoma, which means I am exempt. I have a medical exemption card from any prescriptions, whether it's related to my ulcerative colitis and my stoma or not. That's very handy. Thank you very much, NHS. So I haven't had to pay for any of the metformin. That's all been free. The other costs that are involved are the apps, actually. And honestly, that is the thing that kind of hurts the most, even though it's obviously cheaper than private fertility treatment. But recently I got the yearly renewal for one of the apps that I use, and it kind of just felt like a kick in the teeth, because that to me was just you've not gotten pregnant yet, here, you have to spend more money to keep using this app to track your cycles. And that hurt. I was like, if I'd have got pregnant, then I wouldn't have to pay for this app anymore. I feel like I'm being punished twice over. You know? Kick a woman while she's down. Not cool. But I get it, but also, I don't know. It feels like there should be some more sensitivity there. I don't know, if you are trying to conceive, I don't know how that would work. Because the other thing is the cycle tracking app that I used did a Spotify Wrapped of my menstrual cycles last year. And I was like, what the actual fuck? This is depressing. No, thank you. And it was all very celebratory in tone. You had this many cycles, yay, and you tracked all of this. And I was like, this is not celebration. No. I did communicate that feedback to them via Instagram stories, and they messaged me back being like, oh yeah, we should think about that. I'm like, yes. Anyway, that was a tangent. Are you doing IVF? Not yet. So our first step at this stage, and we are thinking we're gonna go for it, is a consultation. And we need to look into financing options for it as well. There's a thing called Access to Fertility, which is where you pay a big lump sum and you get X amount or unlimited IVF cycles with it, and if you don't have a baby at the end, you get refund. Obviously, it's more expensive to do that than if you were to get pregnant and have a baby from just one round of IVF. So it is one of those kind of insurance gambles. But first step is the consultation, which will cost money, and then we will go from there. But unless I get pregnant right now, this cycle, then IVF is really unacceptable. And that leads us nicely onto this question, which is how to decide it's time for more medical intervention. This is completely personal. There's no advice that I can give on when you should seek more help. We feel like we're in a bit more of a rush because of my health issues. Luckily, with the last flexible sigmoidoscopy that I had to look at the inflammation and take biopsies from my rectal stump. Context, I don't have a colon, I have an ileostomy, I poo in a bag, I have a rectal stump. they have to check it every year for inflammation and precancerous cells. And the last one that I had, it was all good, because if they do find anything nefarious, then I would have to put a pause on trying to conceive and deal with that first. And it likely will affect my fertility and ability to have a baby forever. But the way that we decided was we gave ourselves 12 months. It took us 12 months to conceive our first. And also we started trying in January. And so it kind of was nice because it was like the end of the calendar year as well. So we just kind of said, okay, after Christmas in January, let's just like get some more tests done. And so it's still taken us like 6 months from January of getting some more tests done to now and being like, okay, let's go for it. I don't know, you just kind of like feel it and you vibe it out. Also, there's 2 of us. So I think if it had been my decision, it maybe would have moved a bit faster, but you do have to work at a pace that like works for both of you. Do you know why you're struggling to conceive? Nope. Do not know why. Everything was fine with the high cozy, uterus looking good, fallopian tubes looking good and open. Yes, I've got the PCOS, but the metformin that I have been on has regulated my cycle like pretty well. So nothing that I'm aware of, except for bad luck, is stopping me from conceiving. Because obviously I already know that I have done it before, but hey. Right, our next category is health and body. How do you feel your UC, ulcerative colitis, has impacted your fertility, and do you have guilt surrounding it? So no, I don't think it's impacted my fertility, and I definitely don't have guilt around it. If it did, I would probably like have frustration around it, but I don't think I should feel guilty about my body behaving in a way, in like a disease that I have no control over. There are a lot of complicated emotions and stuff that come up with chronic illness and trying to conceive anyway, and I don't fancy throwing guilt into the mix. No thank you. Off the menu. But one way that I do find that the 2 are connected for me is my rectal stump, and the inflammation there is particularly sensitive to things going on in my womb. So oftentimes when I have ovulation cramps or when I have period cramps, my rectum also like has a mini like inflammation flare too, because that whole area is just kind of like going, like, I don't know, like stuff is happening. And so it kind of like, I don't know, must push against my rectum, or the whole area is a bit inflamed and angry. And so I can also feel like stuff going on in my bumhole too. Fun, there you go. I am notorious for the TMIs, you're welcome. How, if at all, have you been period tracking? Apps, brands, piss, let us know. You know I will let you know. So I've been tracking my basal body temperature, and I use Tempdrop, which is an armband and an app. The reason why I do this with my first, I did the thermometer tracking like in the morning, and that's just because of having a toddler. So like co-sleeping with my toddler, don't co-sleep with him anymore, but still just, I don't always have the opportunity for the first thing that I do in the morning to be take my temperature and stay lying down whilst it's taking my temperature. So the fact that I just have an armband on all night, and then in the morning I sync it to my phone, and that's it. Tempdrop is kind of sold as like the temperature tracking if you are somebody who has broken sleep, aka a mum who is still breastfeeding, which I was when we started trying to conceive. So I do that. I use the Tempdrop app to like obviously sync the temperature, but the actual period tracking app that I use and love is called Read Your Body. And this also syncs with Tempdrop, so it just like immediately like pulls in the temperature. But Read Your Body I love because it doesn't collect any of your data. Everything that you put into the app is locally stored on your phone. It is owned by like a feminist collective. It's probably like the most ethical period tracking app out there, but because it's all locally stored on your phone, that means that your data isn't being used to help an algorithm like figure out where you're at in your cycle. Like all of the information that it tells you and that you put in is you. Like you are the one giving it that information. So in order to use Read Your Body, you kind of need a little bit of like foundational knowledge about fertility tracking, because it's essentially the paper method, but just on your phone. And that's why I really love it. But they have loads of resources if you do want to get started with that, and it's super customizable, but that's my favorite. I love it. And then obviously checking my mucus, my cervical fluids. And then I've also been doing ovulation tests this time around, which I didn't with my first, but here I am, just rocking back and forth, going crazy. But the ovulation tests that I use are ones that are with this app called Premom. pre-mom. I'm a pre-mom. Jesus fucking Christ. But the app is free for what I want to use it for. And you can buy a pack of like 50 ovulation tests for very cheap on Amazon. And essentially what the app helps you do is you take a picture of the strips, and so it interprets for you how dark the line is. So then you can see them all next to each other, and it kind of calculates for you when your peak was. So that I find very helpful, rather than like staring at all the lines and being like, is that one darker? What do we think? When was the peak? But that has been very helpful. But yes, that's all of the things and all of the apps that I'm using. Literally 3 apps. That's insane, isn't it? That's wild. And 2 of them I'm paying for. Do you think the medication for PCOS is helping in any way? Yes, it is. It is. Thank you, metformin. So I had last summer like a 54-day cycle and a 76-day cycle. Like, it was all over the place. It was not fun, not the best for trying to conceive. And then I started taking metformin. I just did 1 dose a day, and that kind of like regulated it around to 40-45 days. And then I started taking 2 doses a day, and I would say it's regulated really well, like around 35 days. So not the 30, but 35, I would say, is pretty fucking normal. It's like at the upper end of normal. Like, I have a normal cycle now. What the fuck? And also tracking my ovulation is wild. So like the day that I ovulate might vary like by 3 to 4 days every cycle. But then from my peak LH test, 14 days later, period. I mean, ideally not period, but like it's wild. Like, I fully know like when my period is due, which I never did before. Are you worried about the second pregnancy negatively impacting your health? Yes, but only temporarily. Like, I got really sick in my first trimester with my first. Like, I was just lying on the sofa for 2 months straight. Couldn't work, couldn't do anything. It was horrendous. I'm expecting that again. Fingers crossed not, but I'm mentally prepared. I'm in the same boat. Every period hits hard. PMS is much stronger than before. Yours too? Yes, I have massively noticed, and I don't know if this is the case for the person asking this question, whether they've been pregnant before or not, but my periods post-pregnancy have been different. The pain, my menstrual cramps are so much worse, and I now get back pain too. So that's super fun. And also I get more pain around ovulation. Like, I can more clearly identify that than I could before. So yeah, nothing else much has changed, but my day 1.5 cramps, front and back, awful. I had them before, but like, it was fine. But now, not good. Okay, our next theme is TTC1 comparison. So how is the way you feel different from last time? I'm honestly more depressed. I'm just more sad all of the time. I think it's taking longer. I'm more impatient. It's bumming me out more. But also I feel like it's hard to remember exactly how I felt the first time round. So I don't know whether that's just the feelings feel heavier because I'm experiencing them now, you know? I don't know. How is hitting the same milestones compared to TTC with Rowan? So when we hit the 12-month mark this time around, which is how long it took to conceive Rowan, that hit me hard. And that was in December. And also around that time, a friend told me that she was pregnant. She told me in a very, very nice way. But I know that her and her partner started trying after we'd started trying. She has a kid already who is younger than Rowan. So like all of those factors just hit at once at the end of last year. I was not okay. And the other milestone that really hurt was age gap differences. So I always wanted to have a 2-year age gap. That's gone out the window. But it was like calculating, oh, if we have a baby now, then they'll be born before Rowan turns 3. And now in my head, I'm like, okay, this is the cutoff point for having a baby before Rowan turns 4. And so those milestones kind of fuck with my head a bit too. How is it different compared to when you were TTC with Rowan? E.g., finding time alone? Do you have to schedule things a lot more this time? Yes, we do have to schedule things a lot more this time. We're just also more tired because we are toddler parents. And then sometimes we will do our best, but we will miss my fertile window because I'm away or one of us is sick or just like life and things just like get in the way. Or we have family visiting, like family visit quite a lot. And that means that Rowan is sleeping in our bed because then guests take his bed. So we're like, okay, well, we cannot try for number 2. So sometimes just like things get in the way logistically that we're like, I guess it's going to be a really tight squeeze to see if we can get it in this fertile window this cycle. Does having Rowan make handling any of the emotions easier than the first time round? Yes, I think definitely. Like, there is that reassurance of, I have a baby, I have a child, he's brilliant, he's wonderful, like I love him so much. And then also just like the day-to-day act of parenting, you really do have to be in the moment. It's kind of quite hard to like wallow in self-pity when there is a 3-year-old like needing your attention, needing your help, wanting to play. There is a flip side of it that makes it harder, especially as Rowan gets older. I have talked to him a bit about what is going on and that mummy and daddy want to have another baby. He's seen pictures of me pregnant, so he's like started to kind of like grasp like where babies come from. Like barely though, barely. And then also I did have one big breakdown whilst I was with him and I was crying about it all. And so had to kind of like explain to him why I was sad. And so he's also started kind of like saying to me, oh, I want a baby in the house. Like, I'm sad that there's not a baby in the house. And so that is cute, but it also kind of like hurts as well. Because you're like, yeah, me too, mate, me too. Does it feel the same in terms of want as it did for baby number 1? This is an interesting question, and I was thinking about it when I first saw it, and I think the want is different. And I think for me, it's because I want 2 kids. I've always wanted 2 kids. After 2, I feel like I'll be very satisfied and done. And so the want for first child was this want and this desire and this need to start my family. And the want this time round is this desire and need to complete my family. I don't really know how else to explain the difference in the feeling of the want, but I hope that makes sense. What lessons did you learn last time that you'll put into practice this time? So there's 2 that I can think of, one that I am putting into practice and one that I just haven't. So the first is making plans, doing fun things, whether they are distractions or just doing things that I really, really love and want to do, and that would either be impossible or difficult or just not as fun if I were pregnant or had a newborn. And scheduling those things in so I have things to look forward to. That I would say is number 1. The other thing is that when I was trying to conceive the first time round, I had a daily gratitude practice. And this was also off the tail end of the pandemic and lockdowns. And so every night before I went to bed, I would write 3 things that I was grateful for. And I did that all through that time of trying to conceive and all through my pregnancy. And then of course, like newborn arrived and that practice just like went right out the window and I haven't picked it back up again. But I try just like in my day-to-day life to like be grateful for the family that I do have and other things that I am grateful for as well, of course. But I don't have that same like kind of rigorous practice. But I do think that that did help me mentally quite a lot the first time round. And maybe that's why I'm sad at this time round, because I'm not doing my gratitude. Naughty Hannah. Oh, and this leads us on nicely to emotional side. Let's talk about our emotions. How are you not just screaming all the bloody time? FYI, I'm also TTC. I am on the inside and occasionally it comes out and I scream on the outside too. Yeah, there we go. What's been the most frustrating or confusing part of this process for you? Not knowing why, just that constant hope of like, well, next time. And the other frustrating and confusing thing emotionally has been other people getting pregnant and birthing their seconds. It's true. What has been an unexpected source of joy during all of this? Having the energy to parent Rowan without pregnancy or a newborn. The unexpected joy is more like when I have those opportunities to kind of like reflect and look back and being like, oh, I wouldn't have been able to like do that thing with Rowan, or we wouldn't have had that really fun day, or this like wouldn't have been able to happen, or I wouldn't have felt the way that I did if I'd, been pregnant and sick or like had a newborn baby to look after as well. So it's kind of like reflecting on those moments and being grateful for them too. And the other thing that is genuinely an unexpected joy, because I was not expecting this to happen anytime soon, but I no longer co-sleep with Rowan. And so I have now had, for the first time in years, plenty of full night sleeps in my bed. And so there is this element of like the bigger age gap and having some time to recover in between 2 like newborn toddler experiences. Many of my friends who have like the 2 to 3 year age gap or even younger kind of go from like one trench immediately into a new bigger trench, whereas I feel like I'm coming out of the trench. And again, it's like pros and cons of each, because sometimes you're just like, I just want to get it all done, I just want to get it over with. Whereas I feel like I'm kind of coming out of that trench finally 3 years later, but I'm like ready to get back in. But then I'm grateful for this time that I do have now, where I have more freedom, I have more flexibility, I'm getting better sleep, like all of that stuff. How are you? Is it possible to see it as just one part of life, or is it all-consuming? I am generally okay, but it is all-consuming. It just is constantly there, and it kind of feels like everything else in life is just kind of like things that I have to do and like distractions on top of it. But it very much feels like it is the foundation of my existence at the moment, which maybe is not healthy. Maybe not great. How will it be for all of you if it never happens? I haven't fully let myself consider this emotionally. I think in my head, the most peace that I've found with it is it will happen eventually, even if we have a huge age gap. Like, that's the peace that I've found in my head. I haven't gotten there yet with finding peace with the we're one and done. But one thing that actually helped recently with like maybe starting to consider that as just a thought experiment was in the Gavin and Stacey Christmas special. So you got Gavin and his best friend Smithy, and then Gavin's parents Mick and Pam. And Mick gives a speech, I think at Smithy's like stag do or something, and he's saying that him and Pam really wanted to have another child after Gavin, but they couldn't. And that was really hard for them. But then when Gavin made friends with Smithy and brought him home, it was like they had another son. And I just like found that so beautiful, and I'm getting emotional. But yeah, oh my God, Gavin and Stacey, why'd you do this to me? Dan and I were watching that together, and I feel like we both had this moment where we kind of like looked at each other during that. And I just think that's really beautiful. And there are other ways to be parents. There are other ways to be adults in children's lives and have a positive impact on other children who aren't necessarily like your biological, legal offspring. That to me, I feel like was my first step into considering that that might be our future. Thank you, Pam and Mick. How do you deal with bitterness when someone announces another pregnancy? I'm happy, but yeah, the bitterness is real, and of course you do not share that outwardly with those people, but do have your people to talk to about it. So Dan is someone that I talk to about it, just other people who get it. In my Patreon Discord server, we have a whole like separate thread for trying to conceive conversations, and everyone is so understanding in there and just completely gets it. And that is a separate space from any chat about pregnancy. Like, those things are separate because we know how sensitive it can be. Yeah, so I just kind of like let myself feel it and talk to people who get it and won't judge. Thoughts on the age gap being larger than you first expected? I really had to mourn the 2-year age gap. And I wasn't just mourning the 2-year age gap, I was mourning this ideal dream family that I'd had in my head since I was a kid. And that's because that was the family I grew up in. That's where that came from. And now with the timings of things, we're kind of staring down like a 4+ year age gap, which was never my plan. But one of the things that has really helped has been asking other parents about their experiences with bigger age gaps. Anytime I meet someone who, when it comes up, they mention the age of their children, and if it's like more than 4 or 5 years, I'm like, what's that like? Tell me. And I actually give them context as to why I'm asking as well, because then I feel like that helps them formulate their answer. And that has been really helpful, and that has been really good. So many parents obviously say that there are good and bad things with every age gap. And so when I ask those parents, they'll be really honest and like tell me about like the good things and then maybe a bit about the bad things. But really what I'm looking for is like reassurance in those conversations. And that has really helped. Like, people have told me about the joys of their 5-year age gap, the joys of their 7-year age gap. 7 years sounds like really big to me. But yeah, those are the things that kind of helped in that regard. Does knowing you have been and can get pregnant make this time around worse, do you think? No, I don't know if it does make it worse. I think there is still this just reassurance of like, I know I can do it and it's just a matter of time. But then that's also just like so uncertain, and what I really would like now is some certainty. Do you feel like it's as hard on Dan as it is on you, or do you have unique feelings that he doesn't? I do feel like it's harder on me for a couple of reasons. One, I want another baby more than he does. He does want another child, but my want is more than his, and that's fine. But I think the main reason why it's harder for me is because it's my body that it's happening to, and I am hyper aware of every twinge, of every feeling, like of everything going on, and like tracking my cycle, like that's all happening to me, and I'm just very, very aware of it. And then I have to communicate what's going on to him, so he's kind of getting it secondhand, whereas I'm getting it like viscerally firsthand, like what's going on. Okay, our next topic is being public about TTC, and someone said, no questions, but just wanted to say I really, really appreciate this topic publicly. You're welcome, but also thank you. Thank you for listening. What's it like doing it out in the open? Have everyone know. I can't help it. I literally mention it to complete strangers if the topic even so much as like veers slightly towards it, but that's just because it is all consuming for me and just like on the tip of my tongue. But the thing that I really like about being TTC so publicly is that friends and family check in. They ask me how I'm doing, like around that specifically. If any of my friends do get pregnant, then they are very sensitive and very lovely when they share that news with me. And it's all been done like private one-on-one rather than like being in a group where a pregnancy has been announced. And so then I have to kind of like react in a group, like no one's put me in that position, which is great. The YouTube channel and like having an audience online and talking about it publicly in that way aside, even just having my friends and family know, I find very useful, especially because it is all consuming. And so without them knowing, it's just gonna feel even more isolating and even harder. Why did you decide to share less of the journey this time? So I assume this is around the fact that I'm not making like the hormone diaries, I'm not doing like a whole series of documenting the whole process. And that was a very conscious decision, and there's lots of reasons why, but logistically, time and energy wise, like I have a toddler now. I just do not have the capacity to be vlogging all of the time that much in depth. And especially because we started trying to conceive right after my career transition. And so I was really trying to focus on that. And I didn't want to have to think about also vlogging all of the fertility stuff that was happening too. And because of the career transition, moving away from the sex ed stuff and that YouTube channel, it then just didn't feel like a nice, clean cut if I then immediately started the year making a new season of the Hormone Diaries, essentially. And also it just felt a bit repetitive. Like, yes, things have been different, but I don't know, I feel like there's not as much to say. Like, I already know I've got PCOS, like all of these things. It just felt like it wouldn't be different enough to the first time round to warrant like documenting it in the same way I did last time, hence why you're getting this video, hence why I kind of talk about it in other Q&As or other things as it comes up or on social media, but there's not like a whole series. All right, but speaking of my old sex ed days, of course we have a sex category. Does it take the fun out of sex? Yes, I think it does in many ways, but you just have to know how to intentionally create that fun, and that will look different for every couple. What is helping to keep intimacy enjoyable? Okay, this is where I'm going to signpost you to 2 of my previous sex ed videos. So go watch the one that's all about responsive desire, the truth about sexual desire, sex drive, myth, and then also the one about sexual currency. Those 2 videos, whilst you are trying to conceive, will be your friend. Just understand responsive desire, understand sexual currency, and try and make those things happen lots and lots in your relationship, and you'll be fine. How do you have time and energy for sex with a toddler around? Yeah, you just have to make it happen. But I found it quite funny recently. I was having a conversation with 2 of my friends who don't have kids, and they were like, yeah, we never have like evening before bed, before sleep sex. The sex that they have is like in the morning, in the daytime. And I'm like, yeah, that's not possible. The only time is evening before bed sex. But I'm like, did I ever used to have daytime sex? Probably. Morning sex? Wow. What's that like? We had lots of questions on this next theme, which I think is really lovely, which is support. How can I support my friend who is also trying for baby number 2 and it's been almost 4 years? Obviously, everyone is different, but if it were me, I would just say, make plans with them to do fun things. Like they're your friend, organize hanging out, book things to do together, get in the diary, just have fun with them, hang out with them, do cool shit that they wouldn't be able to do if they had a baby. Obviously, you said baby number 2, so they have another child, but like figure it out. Logistically, you can figure it out. I believe in you. I want to be more open about it with friends, but I feel it's hard to just bring up. Any advice? I don't believe you should have to bring it up. I don't know your friend group, but do the conversations around babies and pregnancies and wanting to get pregnant, wanting to have a family, did those subjects come up ever? When you're talking to your friends, if it comes up naturally and people are talking about it, that would be an easy time to mention it. And you could always ask someone else first. You could always say, oh, are you and so thinking about having kids? And then that's not like directly on you, you're asking someone else, and then you can share your situation as well if you want. Have you connected with anyone also TTC baby too to talk about it with? So not directly, obviously there's the thread in the Common Room Discord server, which I also occasionally use just to like vent and rant and whatever, but I haven't like connected like one-to-one with someone where we can like chat about our experiences. I think it just feels too risky because what if one of you gets pregnant? Like when you're TTC, you know all too well the bitterness feelings when someone else gets pregnant. And so say if I had like a connection with someone where we talked about our experiences and then I got pregnant, I would know, I am aware of the bitter feelings that they are feeling, even if they don't tell me. And so yeah, it just feels like too risky. I don't know. Is that weird? Moving on to planning ahead. How the fuck do I do this? How to balance planning ahead even though you hope to be pregnant to have a baby by then. I don't fucking know, you tell me. This is what I've been trying to figure out for the last year and a half. No, but I do have a couple of things. Obviously, little wins. This is something that has really helped me, which is focusing on those small achievements of being like, oh, I did this and I was able to do this, or like being able to like future plan, but just like in small increments, but things that still feel meaningful, and just recognizing those little wins has been really helpful. The other thing in my work and in my business more like structurally that has helped, although we're only just like starting experimenting with it now, but if you've heard of this thing called the 12-week year, and so it's splitting the year up into periods of 12 weeks, and so there's roughly 4 of them with some like weeks in between, and essentially what you do is you set goals to work on during those 12 weeks, but not too many. So we currently have like 3 goals that we're working towards in this 12-week period, and that feels doable to me, and it's just useful for me and my assistant Moog as well. Like we know like what we're doing, and so for us, like in this 12 weeks that we're currently in, it's been getting the Creator Talks newsletter out. It is out and ready and everything, and you can sign up and read it. And then the other thing is the updating the website stuff. So even though that's something that I've been saying that I'll do forever, now that it's like part of our like current 12-week goals and our plans, then like it actually is moving, like the project is actually like making progress. And so then when we come to the end of that 12 weeks, we can like, you know, reflect and take stock. And then for the next 12 weeks, we'll be like, okay, what are our goals? What do we want to focus on for this next chunk? So I found that really helpful, like breaking things down rather than being like, my yearly goals, this is what I'm going to achieve in 2025. Like, no. Hence why I made that bingo card as well, because my God, that's the kind of planning ahead level that I'm doing is, hey, it's bingo. Maybe this will happen, maybe it won't. So this is a very niche question. I love it. Have you cut your hair since having Rowan? Is it difficult having tied TTC to hair length? So I don't think I have like emotionally tied my hair length to trying to conceive, but I am planning on donating my hair, I think around the end of August. I'm gonna have it long for the summer, and then I'm gonna be ready to donate it. I initially said September, like after the summer, but because Rowan is gonna be starting preschool nursery at the beginning of September, this is so weird, but I didn't wanna show up to the school gates for the first week with really long hair and then like the next week show up with a bob, because then maybe no one would recognize me. No one would realize it was me. I don't, is that ridiculous? So I was like, no, I'm gonna just like have the bob. Like the bob is then gonna be my new look. And then obviously it'll grow out again and I'll donate it again. But I'm really pleased with my postpartum hair growth. This is the longest my hair has ever been, I think. I don't feel like emotionally tied to it because it's my trying to conceive hair. Because I've been trying to conceive for so long that my hair has just been growing. But I have had my hair cut, which was the original question. I think I've just had a little trim and some like balayage updates 2 or 3 times since Rowan was born. Do you have a list of baby names picked out? So in my head, I vaguely have some names that I like, but nothing written down, nothing concrete, and it's not even something that Dan and I are talking about together. I am not ready to get emotionally attached to a name. I feel like that is like too much for me. Like I don't want to do that because then, I don't know, and then I'll feel like I'll be like mourning every period, like even more so if there's a name. So no, I don't have a name. I mean, I've got lots of names in mind, but there's no like name, you know? Okay, this has been a mighty long Q&A, but thank you so much to everyone who submitted their questions. I hope this has helped in some way, just like sharing my experience. If you have any thoughts, want to share your experience in the comments, or you have any further questions, please do share them, ask away. Happy to answer. If you're currently on a TTC journey, whatever that looks like for you, I'm sending you lots of love and fertility fairy dust. Not that I've got much to spare, but there you go. And I hope that you're all doing well, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.